Okay. Good morning, our viewers. We are here for yet another episode of Strategically Speaking with Dr. Adityanjee. It's a feature of Council for Strategic Affairs, and we are going to have a conversation with Captain Alok Bansal, who served in the Indian Navy for 32 years and is involved with various think tanks based in New Delhi. He has worked very closely with National Maritime Foundation, India Foundation, and some other think tanks. The reason we are having this conversation is that recently Captain Alok Bansal, after hard work of 18 years, put forth a book. It is a scholarly book published by the Pentagon Press LLP, New Delhi, and the title of the book is Gwadar, a Chinese Gibraltar. I browsed through some of the chapters in the book. It's an extensive scholarly work spanning over 7 chapters, 210 pages, and after each chapter there is a bibliography. So everything is evidence-based. There's a reference to everything and no fact is presented without citation. I was surprised, and Captain Alok Bansal was candid enough to state in the foreword that although he worked on this doctoral dissertation, I believe from JNU, he never ever visited Gwadar. So that is a unique thing, and we can understand the security implications why he was not able to visit Gwadar. But let's start with our conversation with Captain Alok Bansal. So my first question, Captain Alok Bansal, is what inspired you to choose this topic for your doctoral dissertation and eventually write this book, which is a scholarly production? Captain Bansal, please.
I have been working on Pakistan for a long time. In fact, it's been over 18 years. I browse Pakistan on a daily basis. Actually, I go through developments in Pakistan on a daily basis. I read at least one Pakistani newspaper from first page to last page daily. And having been tracking Pakistan for a long time, and specifically, I have authored already books on Baluchistan, Gilgit-Baltistan, and different internal dimensions of Pakistan. I had been focusing on internal conflicts in Pakistan. So when I had to register for a PhD thesis, I was told that because of my naval background, I needed to choose a subject which also has a maritime angle. And Gwadar, as you know, has a very significant angle as far as Baluchistan is concerned. Gwadar is one of the largest infrastructural projects that's coming up in Pakistan. And I've always felt that this project has the potential to transform the geopolitical environment in this part of the region. Because Gwadar, as my title of the book suggests, and here is the book for those who have not seen it. I just wanted to show it to them. Gwadar is akin to Gibraltar as far as the British outpost of Gibraltar in the Mediterranean is concerned, because which controls virtually the shipping entering and exiting Mediterranean. Gwadar has the potential to emerge as that Gibraltar which can control every shipping that enters the crucial shipping lanes of Persian Gulf. So I felt this was a subject which was enormously interesting and needed to be brought about. Also, because of my maritime background, I could explain the implications of a huge project like this. Also, because of my linkages with various Baloch nationalist groups, with who have been kind enough to interact with me often, on and off, uh, I understood the dynamics as to why Baloch are apprehensive as far as this particular project is concerned. So that was probably the reason why I started it. And then, of course, once you enter the arena, then it takes a long time coming up. And once you started digging in, meanwhile, while I was working on Gwadar, China started moving into BRI and CPAC and Gwadar. From a standalone project, Gwadar became a key component of the China-Pakistan economic corridor, which by itself is a very, very significant prong of the Belt and Road Initiative. So I thought the significance of Gwadar enhanced considerably. And it is during this period that India also tried to invest in Chabahar port, and different developments took place. So I think the process of writing this book on, as far as my thesis for PhD is concerned, went on and on and on. That's it.
So in the book, you do mention that you did receive some help from Pakistani scholars, including a former Pakistani ambassador to United States, Hussein Haqqani. How did that collaboration work out?
I have had a good fortune of knowing Dr. Hussein Haqqani during his visits to India, and his wife Farah, who was a member of parliament at one stage. And Hussein Haqqani by himself is actually an enigma. You see, he was the ambassador of Pakistan to United States and convicted of collaborating with the United States for anti-Pakistan activities. Well, the poor man was put into jail and is now fortunate enough to be out of it and in the United States. So I had known him, and he was very fortunate enough to give his response. I sent him a questionnaire to which he responded, and he was not only very happy to share it, he also shared a PowerPoint projection by a former National Security Advisor of Pakistan. So that gave me a very good insight, because while I had reached certain conclusions, one needed that sort of validation from a Pakistani academic. And I think that I got from Dr. Hussein Haqqani, as well as others there were certain other Pakistani academics who were very, very helpful to me as far as this particular issue was concerned.
One particular person amongst them is Aisha Siddiqa, who is a Pakistani strategic analyst, of course, currently is living in London, UK, with a similar kind of situation, had to flee the country. How much help did she provide you?
See, Aisha has been a personal friend, and I have known her for over 2 decades now. And in fact, during my visit to Pakistan, she was the only one who could take me around the city of Lahore. Otherwise, we were virtually confined to a hotel and not being allowed to go out. So Aisha has been a valuable friend. And fortunately for me, Aisha had a background. She had been involved with the Pakistan Navy. She had worked with Pakistan Navy in her professional career before the military did not like her independent viewpoint. She wrote a fantastic book as far as military's dabbling into commerce and business was concerned, Military Incorporated. So Aisha did give me, and it was very interesting that both Aisha and Hussein Haqqani by and large agreed on most issues as far as this port was concerned, and they agreed with my postulations on the implications of this port and why Pakistan wanted to go for this port project.
Okay. In the book, you go very deeply into the political history of Gwadar and the fact that it was owned by Sultan of Oman for 176 years. You also mention that Gwadar port was offered for sale to British India by the Sultan of Oman in 1939, but the negotiations stalled. And I'm going to have a direct quote unquote, after 4 years of negotiation, a British adjudicator decided that Pakistan should pay Pakistani rupees 55 crores or $3 million to Oman, which were paid. Consequently, on September 7th, 1958, Gwadar became a part of Pakistan after 174 years of Omani control. Now, the question I have for you, which you have not mentioned in your book, between 1947 and 1958, when the port of Gwadar was transferred to Pakistan, was there any attempt during that 11 years period by the Sultan of Oman to sell this port to Government of India as a successor state to British India? You have been very quiet on that, and I want your answer, a candid answer on that.
See, let me be very clear with you. This is widely perceived in India to be the case that it was offered to India. However, I have not found a single reference or material which validates this fact. we need to understand very categorically that even in 1958, when Oman handed over Gwadar to Pakistan, it was not done so willingly. Please understand, Sultan of Oman had huge emotional attachment to Gwadar. As I said, it had been for 174 years with the Omanis, and Omanis very carefully guarded this fiefdom of theirs. They were not willing. But Oman at that point was not fully a sovereign state. The British had enormous influence on it. And there is no doubt, it is very clearly evident that the British Prime Minister played a major role in forcing, they literally forced Oman to yield this port to Pakistan. And otherwise, Oman was just not ready. And if you see the terms and conditions of transfer of this port, Oman did manage to extract certain rights, not only as far as Gwadar was concerned, but also over Makran coast and Baluchistan. And that is that the people from this part could continue to serve in Omanese armed forces. Oman could procure rice from here, and in case any oil was found in this area, they would again have a say. So academically speaking, and as I said, I have gone through a lot of archival material, the British files which have been declassified. Unfortunately, I have not been able to find anything that it was offered to government of India between 47 and 48. I personally believe this is a perception, because it didn't make any sense for Oman to hand it over to anyone, because as I said, even in 1958, Oman was personally, the Sultan of Oman was not personally keen to hand it over. It was under clear-cut British pressure that it was handed over, and the Britain wanted that this port should be handed over. In fact, the British Prime Minister played a major role, and there are very credible evidence available of the British role of transfer of Oman to Gwadar. And one of the reasons why I have taken too much of time to mention about the political history of this particular port in the book is because I feel very often to an outsider, to an American, to a Western audience, it is very startling as to why a major infrastructural project in this particular part of the world is being opposed by the local residents, whereas they have a lot to gain. And that is where we need to understand the historical trajectory of how this part has become Pakistan, and how Baloch, who themselves have never considered themselves to be a part of Pakistan, was brought together to become a part of Pakistan. And that's why we see that there has been a huge, huge discontent against Pakistan in this part of the world.
You have elaborated quite deeply in your book about the security challenges posed by development of Gwadar deep sea port, especially for India's navy. Pakistan also has now Mohammed bin Qasim port besides the Karachi port. So the leverage Indian Navy had in blockading Pakistan, especially the Karachi harbor, subsequently diminished with development of Mohammed bin Qasim port. But with Gwadar port, that leverage will be entirely gone. In a future military conflict, if India were to blockade Karachi and Mohammed bin Qasim port, how much traffic could be handled by the Gwadar port for Pakistan?
See, firstly, we need to understand that in 71, we clearly showed Pakistan realized that their single port economy could easily be blockaded by Indian Navy by just mobilizing its forces outside Karachi port. And subsequently, even after Port bin Qasim came into being, the geographical locations of the two ports is such that they were both dependent on a single channel. So it was very easy to blockade these two ports, and these two ports, militarily speaking, are very close to Indian coast. So for Indian Navy it was a cakewalk to blockade, because Indian Navy is far superior to Pakistan Navy. It was very easy to blockade these two ports and get support from Indian Air Force for providing aerial support or things like that. Because Karachi, while Pakistani Air Force could interfere, Indian Air Force also could provide equal amount of support to the Indian Navy. Now, unfortunately, what happens is with Gwadar, we move far away from Karachi Port Qasim. It's very far off from Indian territory, Indian borders. In fact, it is the farthest, you can say, amongst the farthest area. Now, to blockade the three ports, you'll require two forces. So now what happens if you blockade only Karachi and Bin Qasim? Gwadar has enormous capacity as far as the essential supplies are concerned. Gwadar can handle all the essential supplies of Pakistan. The only problem would be that the essential supplies would be offloaded at Gwadar and would then have to be taken over road to Karachi and go up, which does not make economic sense at this point of time. But in case times of war or blockade, it makes enormous strategic sense at that point of time. And that is where I think Pakistan has been trying to create pipelines, trying to create roads through the hinterland, because as of now, the road goes only along the coastal highway. So that has been the case. And those are the issues. And this particular port is virtually on Iran. If you see the geographical location, is close to Iran border, outside Persian Gulf. And also, Pakistan has been trying to involve China into the defense of Gwadar. That's been, in fact, one of the factor where both Dr. Aisha Siddiqa and Ambassador Hussain Haqqani have agreed with me is that they believe that one of the main strategic purpose of Pakistan is that they feel that by this particular port, they'll be entwined China in the maritime security of Pakistan.
So thanks for mentioning that, because so far we discussed into India-Pakistan dimension, but there's a security and maritime challenge posed by China because Gwadar deep sea port is a dual use asset. There are already allegations that it is also a naval port or a naval military base for China. India is collaborating with the Islamic Republic of Iran in developing the Chabar deep sea port as a pathway to Afghanistan and linkage to INTC. How much purpose this port of Chabar serve in case of a future maritime conflict? Can it also be developed as a dual asset?
Firstly, we need to be very clear that India has vital interests in Afghanistan, Central Asia, and Trans-Caucasus region. As you know, there was a Mackinder's theory which says whoever controls the Eurasian heartland would control the world. Now, traditionally, India always had an access to Eurasian heartland. We were part of the Silk Road. In fact, from the city of Leh or town of Leh, as you would like to call, as early as the 19th century, there used to be trade worth lakhs and lakhs of rupees, where there was a trade going to two trade routes to Tibet, one to Iran, one to Afghanistan and Central Asia, two going through Chinese territory, Xinjiang to Eurasian heartland, and then others to India. So this traditional axis of Eurasian heartland has been unfortunately snapped post-independence by various actions. By 62, we are now totally, our connectivity with Eurasian heartland has been snapped. Subsequently, Pakistan has ensured after 65 war that there is no overland access to Afghanistan and beyond through Pakistan. So India genuinely has a desire to access this area with which it has huge historical connect, has huge strategic connection, and for that Chabahar was conceived, because Chabahar, like Gwadar, which is in Pakistani territory close to Iran border, Chabahar is in Iranian territory close to Pakistan border. More significantly, both these ports are in Baloch territory. And I think that's why, as an alternative, we propose this. We are handling, operating Chabahar port. Unfortunately, relations between Iran and United States have adversely affected the functioning of Chabahar port, which has really not been able to emerge as a credible, vibrant operational port because of certain uh, sanctions that were imposed on taking goods to Iran, and consequently, it's been difficult for India to develop it as a. Obviously, it cannot be developed as a dual use port because India Iran relations are not similar to China Pakistan relations. And unlike Pakistan, which wants to bring China into the maritime security of Pakistan, not Iran does. Iran is not really interested in doing that. Iran wants to use it as an economic powerhouse. It realizes that in Chabahar it has a huge potential because it can be a key component of taking goods to Central Asia and other parts, Eurasian heartland, for countries like India, Africa, African goods, etc. That could all go through this particular corridor, and there could be huge amount of traffic that could be generated. Unfortunately, that has not really happened, and there has been some sort of a component. But subsequently, what has also happened is we need to understand that this continuing sanctions on Iran and uh, non-normalization of relations with Iran has virtually pushed Iran into the lap of People's Republic of China. And now Iran is also a part of Belt and Road Initiative. So not only is uh, Iran now getting connected through China, through Central Asia, which could be a far more vibrant. So we have these complications as of now. Taliban has unfortunately gone under the control of an extremely obscurantist regime. So India's desire, which where we had a very very strong ally through which we wanted to access Central Asia, may not fructify in near future. But without going to Afghanistan, also Chabahar gives you an option to access Central Asian states through Turkmenistan, and I think we would be using that. And I think we'll be accessing Central Asia. There are railway connectivities that are being constructed. We would also be looking for accessing probably Trans-Caucasus region, that is Azerbaijan, Armenia, Georgia, and other parts of Caucasus through Chabahar. And that's what I think India is looking towards. And if and when this port really becomes a thriving port, it will be in India's interest.
So you rightly mentioned that US sanctions created havoc as far as development of Chabahar port was concerned, and that delay in development also led to some amount of ambivalence on part of Islamic Republic of Iran. And the latest is that Iran has involved China into development of Chabahar airport, Chabahar seaport. Any comments on that?
See, they have two different port terminals at Chabahar. I think while one is with India and we are operating it, the development of another terminal, Chinese investment has started cropping up, and China has been investing. So that's a fact, and that we'll have to recognize. Unfortunately, for India, as I said, uh, Iran is crucial, because if we actually do not engage with Iran, we would have to say goodbye to a vast chunk of Eurasian heartland, because there is no other way that India can access that if we don't actually access it through Iran, considering the fact that our relations with Pakistan are unlikely to become normal at any given time in near future. And we are not, for various reasons, keen, or have not even considered trying to access this land through the Chinese territory of Xinjiang, which could possibly be an option, but as of now, at least we are not very keen to do so. So if we don't really build up something, as of now, Indian goods are going to Central Asia and other parts. They go all the way up to Bandar Abbas, which is a port right onto the western coast of western part of Iran. They disembark there, and then they come back all the way and go to Afghanistan and other areas, which is a very very cost effect. It doesn't make business sense. It is extremely expensive, because they have to go through the narrow straits of Persian Gulf, and that costs. There are huge costs involved. When a ship has to actually travels into narrow confines of waters, you have to invest a lot, because ships have to slow down, they have to take pilots to go through that, and there are costs involved in that, so increases. Then again, they have to travel over land a much larger distance, which again involves cost. So the goods do not remain cost effective once you actually transfer them through Bandar Abbas. But once the Chabahar becomes a functional port, that would make Indian goods far more competitive in this Eurasian heartland.
Now, coming to the security and maritime challenge dimension, as we said, that Gwadar is a dual-use deep sea port with Chinese naval base, and unfortunately, Chabahar could not be a dual-use asset. In a future conflict, if India needs naval facility, where should India access naval facilities in the region? Any ideas on that?
I think India has a large number of allies. We have very good relations with United Arab Emirates. We have reasonably decent relations with Oman. Uh, but times of conflict are different. As I said, it would depend on situation at that point of time. If you actually go back into history, you have seen allies turn enemies when the conflict started. You can see First World War. Italy, which was actually an ally of Germany and Austro-Hungary, actually joined the war from other side. So anything can happen in times of war. But as of now, Indian naval ships have got facilities to do operational turnaround as far as ports in Oman and UAE are concerned. So these are places where we can turn around, and we have the wherewithal. And of course, Indian ports are not very far off as far as operations in Northern Arabian Sea are concerned. And Indian Navy is a far bigger force as compared to Pakistani Navy. And if there is a asymmetry of force as far as armed forces are concerned, it is maximum in the field of the naval forces as compared to Army and Air Force.
So coming back to Oman, United Kingdom still has an Air Force base in Oman. United Kingdom is investing $30 billion in a new military base in Oman. Now, we cannot be pacifist nation because geoeconomics and geopolitics are entwined together. So should India consider maybe hosting a naval base in Oman? And I have a very specific suggestion. Should India?
Yeah, sorry. I feel it would be a worthwhile thing. As of now, India has been fairly pacifist. In fact, we have a very significant. We have made some significant strides as far as the nations of the Indian Ocean region are concerned. We have a good relationship with Mauritius, Seychelles, and even Maldives till recently. But we could not secure Gan Island, which was a former British Air Force base in Maldives for ourselves, though I think this proposal was explored at different times. For various reasons, it has not fructified. As of now, the new government in Maldives is fairly hostile to India. But as far as Oman is concerned, we could look at it. As of now, India's relations in the region are closest with United Arab Emirates, and I think that's a country. And if you actually see the geography, you don't need Oman because you could take it in UAE, because there are Emirates of UAE whose territory and Omanese territory actually crisscross. If you see the northern tip of Oman, there are enclaves, exclaves, and Oman has an exclave on the tip of the Gulf of Oman. Then you have UAE territory, and then again Oman, and there are so many. So you could explore, but that requires a certain amount of confidence in one another. We have fairly good relations with Oman. I'm not too sure whether that will lead to establishment of a base, because for establishment of a base, you need very close relationship between the two countries. But yes, in future, we could look at it, we could explore it. One base anywhere in the Persian Gulf region would be good enough to meet the requirements of Indian Navy.
So, as we say, don't put all your eggs in one basket. We have good relations with UAE. We have partnership mechanisms, not only bilateral with UAE, but also plurilateral. There's a trilateral of India, Israel, and UAE, and there's a US proposed quad, second quad, I2U2, in which UAE is involved. So there's no doubt that yeah, we have good commercial strategic partnership with the state of UAE. But again, looking at alternatives, what do you think India may be developing the island of Masira in Oman as a potential naval base for future?
See, we would like to do that, but let me clarify here. I2U2 and India's collaboration with UAE and Israel, they've all received a setback because of this Hamas conflict in Israel. And to that extent, Hamas has succeeded in its objectives of derailing Arab rapprochement with Israel. And this fact needs to be understood. I think one of the objectives of Hamas conflict was to derail that. And to some extent, it has succeeded. And I think till this conflict subsides, I don't think so Arab states would be willing to offer bases. But yes, we should explore Oman as a base for various facilities, provided the Sultan agrees to do so. We have fairly good relations with Oman, as I brought out earlier, but they will have to be taken to a different level to get that sort of a military base. Please understand, UK has been the colonial power, which has tremendous influence in Oman. In fact, so much so that they could arm twist the Sultan to hand over Gwadar to Pakistan. They may not have that sort of influence today, but even now, the colonial baggage continues. We are trying, and in this part of the world, we have seen what happened in Qatar, that when it comes to military issues, there are powers that be which do not want Indians to become the net security provider as far as these sheikdoms are concerned.
As you know, history never ceases. Geopolitical events happen. And all this discussion is predicated on Pakistan's control over Gwadar, which started only in 1958. Now that situation may change potentially in future if Baluchistan were to become independent state. And there's a lot of Baluchistani groups indulging in resistance. They are very upset at Chinese involvement in Gwadar, Chinese bringing their own labor forces, their own engineers. There are attacks on Chinese workers. Is there any possibility on the horizon about an independent Baluchistan?
See, let me be very honest that a sovereign Baluchistan serves enormous objectives, not only for India, but even for United States. If you remember, long back in US Armed Forces Journal, Ralph Peters had written about blood borders, an article where he had articulated that this territory west of India needs to be restructured because these borders are not historical borders or anything, they need to be redrawn. So as far as Baloch alienation with Pakistan is concerned, this is more or less complete. In fact, majority of Baloch want to break away. But we need to understand that Baloch lack the critical mass to break away from Pakistan. While Balochistan comprises 43% of Pakistan's landmass, it is inhabited by just 5% of its population. Baloch as an ethnic group is a recent creation. Baloch, though people who call themselves Baloch actually speak two different languages. One is Brahui, which is a Dravidian language, and one is Balochi, which is actually an Indo-Persian language. It's actually a narrative of common persecution that has brought them together, and they are fighting. So Baloch realized that with that sort of a population, they are not really able to take on Pakistan military in one way. Balochistan is a dry, parched land. So what Baloch nationalists are doing, they are targeting the lines of communications, that is the road, rails. They also realize that China is the main source that is helping Pakistan to colonize their land. And as a result, they have been targeting Chinese workers, Chinese companies, Chinese assets. But Baloch also face one more problem. The Baloch territory transcends into Iranian territory also. They are facing persecution. So Iran also is not very keen to support Baloch to achieve their independence. So what Baloch have been trying to do, they have been trying to form a joint alliance with other ethnic minorities in Pakistan. Like they have been trying to prop up Sindhis, trying to form an organization with Pakhtuns. They are a part of Pakistan oppressed nations movement. But their biggest success to some extent has been with Sindhis. Most of the Sindhi militant outfits like Sindhu Desh Liberation Army, Sindh Liberation Army, Sindh Republican Army, they all virtually train and thrive under the tutelage of Baloch groups. Those Sindhis are far more numerous. So what Baloch are trying to do is that they are trying to form a wider alliance to take on Punjabi army. because Pakistan's army is primarily dominated by Punjabi. So that is the aim. Unless, of course, Pakistan's army withers away, uh, to my mind, sovereign Balochistan is not feasible. So the army has to wither away either due to internal conflict or because of an external power's intervention, either serious economic intervention, but more likely because of a military intervention, which makes Pakistan army ineffective. If you actually make Pakistan army ineffective tomorrow, Balochistan will be a free independent country day after. And please understand, it would provide you an access to Afghanistan independent of both Pakistan and Iran. And I had advocated as early as 2005 that this would meet US objectives better than trying anything else which they have been trying for a very long period. Of course, now Afghanistan has gone under Taliban, so I think the interests and objectives have changed considerably. But even when we had an Afghan government which was aligned with US and US had to depend on countries like Pakistan for their logistics, a sovereign Balochistan could have served their purpose. Just a no-fly zone over Balochistan would have actually helped them attain what they want.
Okay, so one of the Baloch groups has actually declared a provisional government of Balochistan. And what should be the posture adopted by India towards this provisional government of Balochistan?
See, as of now, we should engage with them. If you read my book, I have said very categorically that we need to engage with them. We need to provide them wherewithal financial support and moral support. I think recognizing the government at this stage may be counterproductive, will not be viewed positively by international community, and we may hold on to it till the movement gathers steam. And as I read, this movement can only fructify if other ethnic minorities in Pakistan join. Let's be very clear about it. As a military person, you know that this insurgency has the potential to continue thriving, but it doesn't have the potential to succeed without the support of other insurgent groups or an active support of an external power. Now, unfortunately, in Balochistan's case, that is the only territory of Pakistan which has no direct connection with Indian territory. So obviously, you can't be doing that. You can't provide that sort of a support which you would require. So, as I said, like Pakistanis have been providing moral and financial support to various groups in India, which have been fighting against government of India, and they have been doing so. I think it would be prudent realpolitik to do that for government of India, to at least provide them covert helps, both in terms of finances as well as maybe some amount of military training.
Let's go back to role of China. And in the book, repeatedly, and also in the China chapter, you mentioned that China has the sense of vulnerability, the so-called Malacca dilemma. And China is trying to solve the Malacca dilemma by developing this Gwadar port, so they have direct access to Indian Ocean through, CPEC. How much true is that?
See, there is no doubt. We need to be very clear as to China's phenomenal growth has been achieved because of huge Western investment, which led to China's emergence as the factory of the world. Now, having emerged as the factory of the world, Chinese economic growth is dependent on access to raw materials from other parts of the world, as well as access to the markets in other parts of the world. So, the Chinese goods go to Africa, large part of Asia, through this Malacca Strait, and even to the Europe and other parts. And similarly, most of the raw materials come from Africa, and especially their oil, the energy hydrocarbons actually come from this part. While China has emerged as a very, very big economy and has a fairly large armed force, their navy still is not in a position to take on the Indian Navy as far as Indian Ocean region is concerned, though they're trying to catch up fast. But as far as Indian Ocean is concerned, Indian Navy has traditionally had an edge over Chinese Navy. Now, this Gwadar allows them that alternative. where they can probably position their forces, escort their shipping through Malacca, or offload their cargo and take it through CPEC to Xinjiang and beyond. Though there will be a huge economic cost. Let me put it very clearly. Taking goods through CPEC is not going to be easy. It's a very difficult terrain, and the pipelines, etc., would require huge capital outlays. And the western part of China does not have too much of economic activity. So eventually these goods which go to Xinjiang would have to be transported all the way to eastern part of China, where the major. But as I said, in times of conflict, in times of hostilities, all these economics actually takes a backseat, because that it's a question of survival, and that is where it is very, very important. The second factor which we need to understand, that a Chinese presence at Gwadar threatens India's energy security, because in India's case, bulk of our energy supplies come from the Persian Gulf. And today, as you know, of course, we are taking Russian oil now because of this Russia-Ukraine war. But otherwise, our three major large suppliers, if there were no sanctions or anything, were Iraq, Saudi Arabia, and Iran. Now, these all supplies were coming from this particular part, and bulk of our refining capacity, fortunately or unfortunately, happens to be in Gulf of Kutch. So if you see the sea line of communication, which starts from Persian Gulf and goes to Gulf of Kutch, it passes very close to Gwadar. So actually, even a small naval force at Gwadar can interdict any ship that's actually transiting through this particular track. And that can cause a serious dent as far as India's energy security is concerned. So that's an issue which we need to be cognizant of. While China does have a Malacca dilemma at this point of time, but it could create for India a Hormuz dilemma if it has presence at Gwadar.
Talking about China again, Chinese are way ahead in strategic thinking. India has been a pacifist nation. We think everything will be hunky-dory. And although you have talked quite a lot about CPEC in your book, you have not talked about CMAC. And CMAC is China-Myanmar Economic Corridor. China is developing China-Myanmar Economic Corridor, land bridge from the city of Cummings, and they are developing a naval base and deep sea port in Myanmar's state of Rakhine, which is actually a fishing town called Capt. And that is, again, their attempts to have access to Bay of Bengal and then eventually Indian Ocean. So China is using a multi-pronged strategy. It's not just Gwadar, they are trying to get access to Indian Ocean through Myanmar and have again a land route through China to Myanmar, because they are contiguous by land. So it's easier for them to transport goods using the rail link from this Capt.
See, as far as this particular issue is concerned, let me clarify. China is not geographically blessed when it comes to access to sea. It has a very limited access to sea, and its approach to the sea is dominated by other countries. If you actually leave the Chinese port and head southeast, you have to pass through the narrow straits of Southeast Asia. You head east, you have to pass close to Japan. You have had actually northeast, you have to pass close to Korea. So they have a problem as far as maritime access is concerned. And as a result, Chinese strategists have always been concerned with their access to Indian Ocean, which happens to be the major sea body through which their trade and traverses. Having said that, as I said, I have focused much on China-Pakistan economic corridor because Gwadar is actually the fulcrum of China-Pakistan economic corridor. When it comes to China, Myanmar, we need to understand. I have been to Myanmar a number of times. I have even been to Kunming. Let me put it across. First thing is, at this point of time, as we talk, the northern border of Myanmar is not under Myanmarese control. It's actually been taken over by the rebels. There is a huge fight going on in that part of the world. And because of that conflict, I don't think so that economic corridor can fructify anytime soon. Secondly, in Rakhine state, we are also coming up with another project. We have Kaladan multimodal project, which starts from there, goes to Mizoram. Also, we need to understand that in Myanmar, having gone to Myanmar, there is actually an underlying current of anti-China feeling amongst the populace. Now, Myanmar is with China not out of choice but out of compulsion, because you have a military regime which the democratic world is shunning, and the only country which is willing to embrace them is China. So they are there. If left to the common man in Myanmar, uh, especially in Upper Burma, you have a huge discontentment against China. So, to my mind, that issue is not going to fructify very soon. Even if it comes through, it will not be safe, secure. Both China-Pakistan economic corridor and this China-Myanmar economic corridor are beset with serious insurgencies. And at this point of time, Myanmar issue looks very, very difficult, because Kokang, as you know, Kokang army is also fighting. Kokangs are basically Chinese, ethnic Chinese living in Burma. They are actually in the northern part, and there's one of the very powerful army. There have been times when Myanmar Air Force have actually bombed inside Chinese territory, killing Chinese citizens. So there have been huge repercussions in both sides. And at this point of time, if actually the democratic world was to give adequate support to the opposition in Myanmar, opposition is probably at the stage where they can probably take over Myanmar, significant chunk of territories, because they have support of the masses. The elections have very clearly showed that. But uh, ethnic groups have come together. If an external power could mediate between various groups and help them to form a certain constitutional norms to set up an alternative government, you could probably see. And I don't think so Myanmar stabilizes in near future. So as long as Myanmar doesn't stabilize, I think this route is very, very difficult. Rakhine state is, as it is, a very, very difficult terrain, and you have different armies, because Rakhine state is where you have Rohingyas who have now grouped into various radical armies. You have a Rakhine state army, which is actually another ethnic group which is fighting against the government. Then you have the government. So you have three, at least, actors who are fighting there. There are three. So it's not going to be very easy for trade and commerce to flow through such areas. It is something like people have been thinking of trade and commerce flowing through Taliban ruled Afghanistan, which has not really happened, or Afghanistan for decades, which has not happened.
So I'll just make two incidental observations on your analysis. Number one, China has been supplying arms to various ethnic rebel groups in Myanmar, including in the northern states. So they are hand in glove with both the sides. That is number one. Second thing is that there is some sort of conjecture that the reason Myanmar's army moved in to nullify the democratic elections was that Dao, Aung San Suu Kyi, was trying to develop independent relations with Xi Jinping and hit off very well with Xi Jinping when she went to China and was accorded a warm welcome by Xi Jinping, putting Myanmar's army on the guard because they were afraid that Aung San Suu Kyi might sell Myanmar's interest to China. Comments?
See, having been to Myanmar and having interacted both with NLD politicians and USDP politicians, I have had a fairly good insight into Burmese mind. And I would like to put it across here that the constitution under which elections were held was a flawed one. It actually gave military a very, very crucial stake in the government. And that sort of a system couldn't have functioned for a long time. And Aung San Suu Kyi, obviously, after first term, in second term, wanted to curtail that army's hold to some extent. And I think it is this particular factor which led to the army to intervene. Because army, or Tatma Dao as it is called, has huge stakes in Myanmar society. They have created a self-serving state where the interests of the army are served by all. And they have been trying to play on Burmese fears of disintegration. Because please understand, the majority of the territory of the Myanmar is actually controlled by ethnic minorities. the Burmese, who are an ethnic majority, actually dominate only the heartland, which is geographically a smaller area, though of course they are much more in numbers. Over 65% are Burmese. So that is the fear that they have been trying. But despite that, NLD was able to win a clear, resounding victory in the last elections.
So
There is no doubt that when Aung San Suu Kyi visited and she had very good reception, the Chinese that way are fairly pragmatic. They are willing to engage with anyone, whoever is in power, as long as it serves their interest. But this policy of putting their uh, eggs in both the baskets and standing on two boats may not serve long, because at the moment, if you talk to Burmese people, they feel that it is the Chinese who are backing the opposition. That's what is the perception. I don't think so. I have found very credible evidence that the opposition has been supported by Chinese. But opposition forces have managed to capture significant territory, so much so that you saw Burmese soldiers crossing over into Indian territory to take shelter because they had to run away from their posts. That was the level of fear.
Let's come back to China's quest for overcoming the Malacca dilemma. CPAC is one option, CMAC is another option, and you have certain views about that. China also has got a very good opportunity at this point in time. The new Prime Minister in Thailand has announced a land bridge project, 90 kilometers, rail and road link that will involve $28 billion of investment. And that is an opportunity sent by heaven to China, because Gulf of Thailand will be linked with the land bridge to Indian Ocean. Does it help China? It does help Thailand.
See, let me be very clear. The Kra Canal is a project that's been talked of from different times at different periods.
And this is not Kra Canal. This is not Kra Canal.
No, I agree. But the Thai peninsula, the Malaysian peninsula, the territory, at different places people have talked, because it cuts down the distance from Andaman Sea to Gulf of Siam. That is where you can actually go. But as far as China's Malacca dilemma is concerned, it doesn't really eliminate the thing. The ships would still have to traverse through the Indian Ocean, and it would be feasible for Indian Navy or any other navy which is ensconced in the Southeast Asia to interdict shipping. Similar is the case with China-Myanmar economic corridor, because if the Chinese goods have to come onto the coast in Andaman Sea, they could be easy targets for Indian Navy or for the Indian Armed Forces, or for that matter, any force that is aligned with India in this part of the world. So that's why I said, as far as their crucial Malacca dilemma is concerned, that will not get exacerbated. It does provide them an access to Indian Ocean, trade-wise, economics-wise, it makes sense. But as I said, that strategic security which they are looking for, as far as their energy and their trade is concerned, that does not come from either a canal through Thai territory or another access through Thai territory, or a road come rail linkages through Myanmarese port to Yunnan and other areas. That we need to be very clear, because all these will be susceptible to interception till Chinese Navy emerges as such a big power where they can actually come to Indian Ocean in strength and be in a position to control the shipping, which to my mind doesn't seem likely, at least in near future.
Talking about the plan's goal is to have what is called TSN. TSN stands for 1,000 ships navy.
Yes.
And not only they have a naval base now in Gwadar, they do have a base, you can say a military base, naval base, or whatever base in Djibouti. It is the fastest growing navy, the plan.
See,
so should we underestimate an adversary that is growing very fast, working systematically on this string of pearls strategy? When it came, people poo-pooed it, lampooned it, that it is figment of imagination. And yes, India is developing some naval assets, in in Mauritius and all. We've talked about maybe developing a naval base in Oman. Should India consider developing a naval base in Somaliland to counter the
I have
base?
been a very strong proponent of India engaging with the government of Somaliland. That would be an indirect channel for engagement with Taiwan, because the only country there that has recognized Somaliland as of now is Republic of China. Somaliland's location is wonderful. Somalia has to be given up, I think. I know government of India traditionally does not support breakaway republics, breakaway forces. Nobody in the Western world has done it. But please understand, in a turmoil ridden Somalia, Somaliland and Puntland to some extent, but Somaliland to a large extent, is an oasis of stability. And a time has come where we need to engage with them. Coming to Chinese base in Djibouti, let me make one thing clear. Djibouti is now emerging as Casablanca, where any country and every country has a military base. You have a Chinese base, you have a French base, you have so and so base, you have so many bases. So, while these bases do provide those navies with certain amount of operational turnaround capabilities, they are not credible defensible bases when you are having different bases one after the other belonging to different country. So that's one issue. I have no doubts. I have been recommending that we should look at Somaliland as a viable option, not only from the military point of view, but also from a strategic point of view. That would be a good signaling, and that could be a via media for a trilateral engagement with Taiwan, which we may not like to do so directly, but that would be a good option. And Somaliland has phenomenal natural resources which could be tapped, and uh, I don't see Somalia stabilizing. Actually, I'm also not very keen for breaking up other countries, but that's a fact. That's a de facto reality that I think the international community as a whole, and India in particular, needs to recognize that Somaliland has a functioning government, and it is the only part of erstwhile Somalia which has been functioning as a full-fledged government for such a long period of time.
So, on that point, the two of us are in complete unanimity because in October 2011, I wrote a piece in Vivekananda International Foundation website recognizing Somaliland, exhorting government of India that far back to recognize the Somaliland. So that is something to think for the future security and strategic, implications for India. My last question to you, Captain Alok Bansal, is in order to have the access to European or Eurasian landmass per Mackindor's theory, has time come for India to take back our occupied territories in Gilgit and Baltistan that are part of India?
See, let me tell you, Gilgit Baltistan has been very close to my heart, and I have published a few books on Gilgit Baltistan actually. This one is one, and this one is, of course, another which I had published long back. And this is our territory, and we have no reasons why we should not look at this area. There is discontentment in this particular part of the world. But again, as I said, in the past, governments have not really engaged with the nationalist forces in this part of the world. But I think now the government should look into it. When, how, that I think is left to the governments. But we should undoubtedly look at reoccupying these territories. And I have always believed that we should look into this particular area. There is a discontentment, please understand, but this discontentment is not because there is any love lost for India or something like that. There are genuine grievances of the people of this particular area. This area has enormous cultural diversity which is actually being wiped off under the onslaught of Islamic fundamentalism or radicalization that is actually seeping in from Pakistan. The people here are by and large adherents of Shia Islam. There are Ismailis and Ithna Sharias, that is 12 Shias, and they are being persecuted by this radicalized Sunni Wahhabi Islam that's coming from Afghanistan and Pakistan. We just a few days back, there was a bus which was fired at, though it's not been said in the Pakistani media, but it was a sectarian attack. We all know that's been the favorite tactics of these people who are targeting Shias going into Gilgit-Baltistan. They are targeted in buses that are actually accessing from this part to that part, and they have been targeted. So this has been the norm, and I think we have been trying to do that. And time has come that we need to start preparing strategies to take back this territory should an opportunity arise. Considering the international scenario, I don't think so we would like to do that at this point of time, but we ought to be ready, because considering the way Pakistan is going, that opportunity may arise anytime soon.
So de jure, or the instrument of accession, is a part of India under adverse possession.
Not only that, in fact, let me make it very clear. I was in People's Republic of China just a few days back, and I made it very clear that as far as China-Pakistan economic corridor is concerned, it passes through a territory which People's Republic of China considers it as disputed as per Sino-Pak Agreement of 1963, is not a part of Pakistan as per Pakistan's constitution, and is an integral part of India as per Indian constitution. So any movement, any traffic that should have passed should have been consulted with India. So that is de jure our part, and we need to ensure that it becomes de facto. But in one of my books, I have said one thing very categorically, that a country does not become a nation does not lose its territory when it is occupied by somebody else, but a nation loses its territory only when it goes out of your mental space. So as long as you remember Gilgit-Baltistan is yours, it will remember yours. But for that, we need to know what Gilgit-Baltistan is, who are the people inhabiting Gilgit-Baltistan, what is the history of Gilgit-Baltistan, what is the geography of Gilgit-Baltistan, what are the languages spoken in that area. Unfortunately, no attempts have been made in India as of now. We are slowly trying to do that. And a yeoman service has been done by an organization called Jammu Kashmir Study Center, which has brought this issue onto the main stage. They have highlighted the requirement of Jammu Kashmir, and they brought it, highlighted it, and brought it onto the main stage. So this is what it's happening, and this hopefully should come into the forefront in days to come.
It was a pleasure indeed to have you, Captain Alok Bansal, on our platform discussing your new book, Gwadar, A Chinese Gibraltar, and the strategic challenges, not just to India, but to entire world, in the interest of free and open Indo-Pacific, to have this discussion. We hope that you will continue to grace our platform in future also for various activities. We wish you well in your book, and thank you very much indeed for coming to Council for Strategic Affairs platform. Thank you very much.